Hey everyone, it's Robin, RS Island Crafts, and welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to show you an easy way to take two charm squares and turn them into two four patches. Now this technique will work with any size square. Because I'm using a 5-inch charm square, my finished four patches will finish at 4 inches. That means this square right here measures 4.5 inches. It's really simple. Whatever size your square is going to finish at, you add an inch. And that's the size of the squares you start at. Now, if you have a little bit of a problem sewing the perfect 1/4 inch seam and things just get a little wonky, add a little extra to your beginning square. So if you were using something besides charm squares, I would start with something that's 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches larger than your finished squares, and that gives you that wiggle room to trim things up. But today I want to use some leftover charm squares from this pack by Moda, the Enchanted by Gingerbread. And then I'll turn these into something fun afterwards. I have chosen what I would consider a dark fabric and a light fabric. When using a pack like this, it's really kind of up in the air which one is exactly which. Some of them are very easy to see on the light, and then I ran out of matching them that way, so I just brought in some different colors. But the two I'm going to show you today are really easy because I have what I would consider a definite dark and a light. This technique I prefer to do with non-directional fabric. Even though this fabric does look directional, I'm not going to consider it anything directional. That way I don't have to worry about which way to turn anything. I just tried to mix them up. Sometimes I put it this way, sometimes I put it this way. It doesn't really matter to me. So I'm going to line these two up. Now, one of the questions that we see a lot when dealing with charm squares is, do you measure the charm square from the outside, the mountain edge of the pink square, or from the valley? And that's a good question because it's really going to be determined by the charm pack or the person or company that's cutting them. I always check every charm pack. Even within the charm pack, sometimes there's some that are a little bit off. But if we look at it and we bring this all the way over and I go by the tops of the mountains and I line it up here and the top here, we can see that it comes right to 5 inches. If you were meant to measure by the valleys, then you would line it up at the valley at both points and then see where it ends up here. Now here I'm okay because now I have the mountains to cover it. Some charm packs might not have those pinked edges. Take my two charm squares and layer them right sides together. This is a project that you can easily chain piece. So I'm going to go ahead and make two. When I sew mine, I'm going to mix these two up, which is why I'm just going to show you with two different sets of charm squares. But if you just use one set at a time and you keep it all together, your charm square will be a perfect match. You will have this fabric here and there, and these two fabrics will also match. So I'll show you what it looks like in both versions, and then I'll show you how I plan on doing mine. But I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam, a 2.0 stitch length, and I'm going to stitch down this side and this side. It doesn't matter for me because of the non-directional. It doesn't matter which way I turn my square. I'm just going to stitch down the right side and the left side. Same thing with this one. I do have some unicorns. He's going to get chopped up, so it's not going to really matter. So I'll put these two together. See, this one I have the lines going left and right. This one I have it going up and down. Again, it doesn't really matter, but sometimes I just like to switch things around. Line these up. You can go ahead and put pins in it. We are going to stitch on both sides, so you can go ahead and pin in the center. I go ahead and chain piece mine, meaning I stitch down the right-hand side, and then I just put a little piece of scrap fabric, take this out of the machine, and I go ahead and stitch down the right-hand side again. So I have it parallel here. Cut the joining threads. This makes it a very quick project if you want to just go ahead and put a whole charm pack through, or if you're going to mix up a bunch of leftover scraps. Works out great for all kinds of projects, including the holiday fabrics. Now you take this over and you can press it, but we're going to go ahead and cut down the center. So we'll keep our seams on either side and we'll split it down the center. Now remember, our block started at 5 inches. And the halfway point is 2.5 inches. So I can line 2.5 inches up on the edge, or you can put your seam right at 2.25 inches. So if you're a little bit off, you can always go off by your seam. But I'm just going to go ahead and lay it down so that I have the 2.5 and the 5. You can line it up on your mat just to double check, but I prefer to use my ruler as a guide. But it does It does help me realize, like right now I'm at 2 3/4, so that's not lined up, so I need to move it over just a little bit. And then I will go ahead and cut it here. And that's going to give me 2 rail fence blocks. Now, if that's all you want to do, you can go ahead and stop right here and you can work with the rail fence blocks. But I'm going to continue on to turn them into 4 patches. I'm going to cut this block also. And you can see where I went ahead and cut my unicorn head off, and that's okay. Take these over to the iron, and I want to press them to the dark side. So I'll put the dark side facing up, and I'll take my iron and I'll press it this way. If you didn't already press it when it was in this position, go ahead and hit it with your iron this way to go ahead and set those seams. And what that does is if you feel this before it's ironed, you can feel kind of a ridge where your seam line is. And after you press it with the iron, it settles everything down, that stitching line. Because if you don't do that, that little bit of a ridge, when you open up your block and you bring it over this way, sometimes, not always, of course, there's never an always, but sometimes that will cause that one little thread difference there and you won't get that perfect 1/4 inch seam. Of course, if you prefer, you can always press your seam open instead. It works either way. Now this is where I was saying you can mix everything up or keep it the same. If you want to have a 4 patch that looks like this, that's all the same matching fabrics, you're going to put these 2 together. And what you'll do is you'll take that seam and you will opposite it so that the dark is with the light and the light is with the dark. So we'll put them right sides together. And if you want, you can go ahead and put a pin or a clip in here and here just to hold it in place. I want to nest my seams, which means with this seam going one way and this seam going the other way, when I put them together, and you'll feel it, you'll feel how it just settles into place. But this will allow it to sit right next to each other. But I want to mix mine up. I don't want to have anything specific because I didn't have matching fabric to do it with anyway. So this way, if I mix it all up, it won't matter. So I'll take one of these, light and dark, and I will flip them, and I'm not going to worry that there's 2 of the little dots. And because I have one going one way and I flip the other one, you can see how they're going to be a little bit different. So if you are working with directional fabric, you can make a test block. Use some scrap fabric if you don't want to use your charm squares, and just see where the designs might end up based on which way you turn your fabric. So I want to make sure that the seams match up all the way across on both of them. Dark and light going in opposite directions. And since we pressed our fabric to the dark, it allows it to nest real easily. When I take it back to the sewing machine, this time I'm going to turn it this way. And I'm going to stitch across that seam on both sides so that when I open it up, I will end up with my 4 patch. So let me take it over and stitch these and these. Once again, I'm going to cut down the center in between these 2 seams. It's good to make sure that your seams are lined up in the center. I gave mine a nice press just to keep them in place. If anything shifts here, you might get a little bit of a wonky square. My squares are still 5 inches, so we are going with the 2.5 inch. And when we open it up, we have our nice little 4 patch. This part right here is the most important. You want to have all of your seams lined up, and you want it all to go nice and neat there. Let's check the other one. Sometimes they get a little bit off on me. If it's a little smidge off, I don't worry about it too much. If it's too far off, then I will either make a new block or seam rip and fix it. Now, if you made your beginning square larger than you needed, then this will be fine, but you'll need to trim them up. I'm going to start by taking these over and giving them a good press. I just pressed mine to whatever side. You can press them in any way that works for you. Again, press them open. Some people like to press them so the seams spin. I just go ahead and press them in whichever way, and then you can lay them out with the rest of your blocks. Now, depending on what you consider light and dark, I might end up with a situation like that, but I can always move things around so that it's not too obvious. Now, if your blocks were larger and you cut it 1.25 inches or so larger, at this point you would then want to trim up your block. And that's as easy as figuring out what size you are going to have your blocks before they're finished. So this one measures 4.5 inches. If I had extra fabric around, I would find the center of my block, which is 2.25, and I would put the 2.25 line on the seam here and the 2.25 on that seam there, and then I can trim any excess. So it all depends on what size square you're going for, and that's how you're going to trim it down. Majority of the time, if everything worked out well, you won't need to trim your blocks down. Everything should be okay. Your scrappy word for today is charm pack. Do you like working with charm packs? I think charm packs are a great way to get a variety of fabrics from the same line. And it's a nice way to just dabble a little bit without spending a lot of money purchasing yards and yards of fabric. Now this one I believe comes with 42 squares. Yes, always check your charm packs because sometimes they come with a little bit less, but I don't think I've ever seen any with more than 42 squares. Several of the big names I've seen with only 40. So if you're making a specific project, keep an eye out. Now, if you head on over to Pinterest, you will find lots and lots of projects that use just charm squares. Or if you're looking for another fun project you can sew, you can check out this video or this video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.